Testing 1, 2, 3.
We are starting with the guide outline item 1.0, suiting and ingress. As far as we're concerned, the suiting situation is completely satisfactory. I think the crew should ingress as late as feasible and possibly 10 to 15 minutes later than what we did.
Up to 20 minutes later could be.
And I think that what we came up with should be carried out in the following flights, and not having a complete suit loop integrity check, pressure check, because the suit is checked individually earlier, and so it should be out because it loosens the straps and everything.
That gives us that 15 or 20 minutes gravy for a for a crew ingress, and they ought to take
the
advantage
coolant
of it.
loops and everything. I think this problem is all satisfactory. None of us felt too cold or too warm. It was beautiful. Status checks and countdown, completely normal, satisfactory. For powered flight, I think we ought to look at our other tape before we get in.
Let me back up once about status checks and countdown. I found out we knew we had a bad fuel cell 1 O2 meter. In other words, the meter had failed to 0 position, and we all were ready to go without it. The ground could see fuel cell O2 flow rates. However, I was not briefed, and no one told me that when you go to the fuel cell 1 position to monitor the hydrogen flow or any of the other aspects of fuel cell 1, that you would get a master alarm. And the only reason that was discovered is that I was going through the systems on my own prior to liftoff, and when I went to that position we got a master alarm. Then I was told later, after people looked into it, that this is a normal configuration, but I sure would like to have known that point before we lifted off.
I think John and I found one item that was omitted by the pad crew, and that was prior to the day of reentry, or before reentry. We started looking around, and we noticed that the brace, the 0G brace, was hooked up. And I said, gee, the one behind my head, and I said,
This is a couch strut brace that braces the couch when you have the foot XX struts removed.
and I said, I don't remember anybody putting that up. And John said, I don't either, you know. And
I thought Gene did it, and Gene didn't do it. So obviously we launched with that couch strut brace locked and installed.
And if we'd have
The
boarded it,
OCP ought to be, the countdown OCP ought to have a check to make sure that brace is
and I can remember the first thing
stowed.
when I ingressed to the spacecraft, I looked down and that brace was there. And none of us put the brace up, so it was never down to the stowed position for launch. So that's an item that should go in this. Powered flight will be discussed with its the only anomalies. Well, I think we'll talk powered flight in a separate item. It includes the TLI burn. The Earth orbit and systems checkout was completely nominal, and we were running 20 to 30 minutes ahead of time, except when we had to wait for specific items. And again, I think the total philosophy on this is to make things as simple as possible, and that was the approach we used, and we were always ahead of the game.
Roger. Probe extension, which you're told would be very slow, was exactly like it was in the simulator, the talkbacks, and we heard an audible click when the probe got fully extended.
Again, we'll pick up the powered flight for TLI burn along with the powered flight and what we observed there in a separate area. The Trans-lunar coast, we worked out a new refs mat and an attitude for Trans-lunar coast, and this was completely satisfactory. The first night when we set up the deadband, we noticed near the end of when the vehicle would reach the deadband and the thruster would fire, and we're trying to sleep, to me the noise of the thruster was not annoying, but the total dynamic response of the vehicle was. You could feel about 3 or 4 cycles, and it felt like a very loose vehicle, like a large airplane, something like a B-47 or a C-133, the way that the structural dynamics worked. And after that, the next night, we changed a procedure of damping the rates to 0 before we set up the mode instead of setting up the mode and then damping the rates. And after that, our longest period of time we went without firing a thruster was 18 hours.
It's recommended that this PTC setup and operation be considered a nominal PTC GNN mode and be used in all future flights. It's really a gas saver.
It's very simple and it's easy to do and it's just beautiful. I couldn't ask for anything any better. The communications throughout this whole time appeared satisfactory.
Even without thruster firing, on several occasions, for unknown reasons, we'd be sitting there on the second night, and no thrusters would be firing, and the whole stack would suddenly give a shimmy, and it was very recognizable because we're all sensitive to zero gravity. Unexplainable, but apparently quite normal. The whole stack would just sort of resonate up and down one time, and we go on from there. It's kind of weird, but very interesting.
It might have been some fuel slosh in the lunar module, but it had its own noise. The stack had its own noise. You could hear things rumbling around, and it had its own little vibrations in there that wasn't not command module, glycol pumps. It was a low frequency amp of a low frequency. But you could definitely feel that the whole stack had its own little motions there. Now, we never felt that on the command module coming back.
No, we never felt it.
We had the limb on
Just
board.
with a limb on there.
And also with the limb on board, when you fire one pulse again to 9 crew briefers, on this, the whole stack feels to be a very loose structural model.
It'll set up this frequency and shake the whole works.
usually,
Nothing you could see on a rate needle, but you could feel it.
you just kind of have it, and we timed it, and it would go through about 4 cycles. It would damp to 0 in 3.5 to 4 cycles. It was like flying a big shaky.
The communications all the way out was excellent. We went S-band Omni most all the time, especially during the PTC sleep modes. The Omni, the ground switch, the Omni antennas, they did an excellent job. We didn't have to worry about loss of comm. We were in squelch.
Huh?
We were in squelch enable. We had no noise problems. When we used the high gain antenna, the react mode, it worked very fine all through the Trans-lunar coast.
Okay, we inadvertently slipped back to the basic index. Again, under item 1, shooting and ingress, I think everything has been covered in this area, with the one notation about the couch support strut being locked there where it should have been in a stowed position. Status checkout and countdown, seeks pyro, comm verification, emergency detection system, all those went as previously during the CDDT and previous checks.
We did no stable member azimuth check.
The FDAI power, the GDC alignment, EDS, everything was completely satisfactory.
Didn't fire the RCS. The LTV check was nominal.
The ground communications and countdown were beautiful. I've never heard better.
The ground communications still had this, remember that VHF transmission?
We had a crosstalk. As far as the vehicle, was
Yeah,
good.
but that's the kind of thing where if they ought to fix that, because dadgummit, there's no reason to have the VHF keying in your ears, or whatever it was that was keying, because you don't know whether it's difficult to tell whether you got a spacecraft problem or a ground problem, and they ought to correct that, because maybe you might launch with an anomaly if you keep going with that kind of a situation.
It's without question recognizable, such like an open mic.
It's like an open mic, and I don't see why the dickens they have it. It seems to me like a little effort to fix it.
It appears that it's back in the comm center at the cadence where the crosstalk occurs.
I see no reason to live with that.
Okay, the rest of the countdown, and I think it's beautiful. There's no problem. The powered flight we're going to cover when we get our one tape back.
The vehicle did sway prior to ignition. The vehicle swayed, and you could see it on the rate needles. And with the small winds that we noted, it was a very noticeable swaying and not objectionable.
S1C ignition, again, as briefed previously, the Stony count was right according to our pre-briefed procedures, and he would call ignition when he actually saw fire coming out of the F1 engines. This occurred at about -6 seconds. You could feel the rumble and vibration start to build up at -3 seconds. Liftoff was very obvious with a slight increase of pressure on your back and a decrease in vibration, very similar to Gemini.
Really had a sensation of motion.
You had a
I don't know how
sensation
to
of
phrase
motion.
it other than that. But
You knew
sure
you'd
were
lift it
going.
off
That's
without
right.
question, all three of us.
It was it was a smooth, the noise, vibration, intensity. We had no problem at all talking to each other, and the noise inside was very low. I thought for this, it was a lot
I
like
did too.
His voice comm was excellent in intercom, and none of us wore anything else except the Snoopy helmets.
voice, audibility, stability of ascent. Now the yaw tower maneuver. What I observed on the rate needles at the 2-second yaw maneuver was approximately 1/2 of what we've seen in the simulator. The deflection on the attitude arrows and the deflection of the attitude arrow needles was approximately 1/2 the magnitude of what I've seen on the DCPS and the CMS. And this should be corrected. Instrumentation observations, fine. Launch vehicle lights, again we had analysis of the lights burning out before and the dim lights, but there's no problem. Tower clear was called on time. The roll program and the pitch program was nominal. The change, no problem. Cabin pressure decrease, you could hear the cabin relief.
Loud and
Cabin
clear.
pressure decreased
Loud and
about a minute, didn't it? That's
Yeah, it
when
was
happened.
late. It was
Late.
somewhere around a minute to a minute and 10 seconds. But when it did, it was loud and clear, and the simulator is a good simulation.
The Mach 1 and Max Q noise levels was to me was less than Gemini.
That's right.
It
I
did
agree
not
with that.
scream and howl like Gemini did.
That's right. But the vehicle was. Could you feel? I felt the vehicle. Still the vibration, and then after we got on a Max Q, it was like riding a Superbird.
After Max Q, the noise of the F1 engines were less than we had in Gemini.
Yeah.
The F1 engines were very low, and it was just a beautiful.
Quiet, smooth bird.
The EDS was turned off to manual at 2 minutes. The vehicle was just. We noticed no pogo oscillations during S1C burst.
No, and there was no problems turning off the EDS. I was a little worried that we might have problems reaching that switch in 3 or 4 Gs. There's no problem associated with that.
The S1C inboard cutoff was on schedule, and again, no problem. And at the outboard cutoff, we experienced, we were expecting a negative G. Oh, we'd also been briefed by the Marshall people that we could expect the outboard shutdown approximately 2.5 seconds earlier, and we were expecting it at 2 minutes plus 37 seconds to 38, and the booster burned all the way to 240, maybe a little over 240 when it shut down. Now at this time we had expected a negative G, and we thought it would just be one pulse, but what we had there was a tremendous structural pogo oscillation, and it was approximately 4 cycles where we were slammed forward, back, forward, back, forward, back. And the instruments to me were kind of blurred, and
It was a wow.
it was the wildest thing I've been on. And the other,
All I could think of was
the noise and sensations to me sounded exactly like when he opened the pre-valve on the Gemini Titan at about minus 45 seconds before ignition went kaboom.
Amplified by about
But
10.
amplified by about 10 times. But it went through 4 cycles like that, and when it damped, I was trying to call staging, but I couldn't talk. And
It was.
and when everything had settled down, when it had settled down, all the engine lights outrun the S2, and we were burning away just smooth as silk. But it was obvious that it was the S2 stack that unloaded on us, because we still had the dynamics after the lights went out. So when we expected this, because they have cut over 10 tons of metal out of that S2. And then the S2 was just beautiful.
We figure what happens is that thing is sitting there under tension, and then when it stages, it lets go, and this whole thing goes back to its normal thing, like in 0G, and it's going to oil can a couple of times.
Like a barrel.
I
Like
bet the
squeezing,
fuel slosh is going up and down and
And
everything.
it was the darndest thing I've ever been through.
like squeezing a barrel vertical, where the stays just expand and then
Yeah,
retract to
yeah.
normal.
We
normal
went
dimension.
through, and as far as I can remember it vividly, it was 4 cycles there, and it was a 4 cycle with a decrease in amplitude per cycle, but with loud noises and.
I bet the structural things that's
It was-
going on in there are something
Well,
fierce.
we were worried
you
about
know?
it. We were worried about it breaking hardware in the command module limb and everything else. And then on the S2, you could barely hear the engines, and everything was just smooth and beautiful.
The S2 ride was so quiet and so smooth up until we got to staging that
Yeah.
you hardly knew anything was burning.
And it was just beautiful. Now the no, the staging as far as any gaseous as far as the S1 separation, we were going through the pogo at that time, and the structural pogo, and I couldn't tell you what went on outside. I could barely see the instrument panel. It was being slammed back and forth so much.
Prior to Tower Jet,
You know when the retro rocket was fired from the first stage, all I could see was the instrument panel coming back and forth like that, and by then we're gone on the S2.
Tom, why don't you pick up at 26 here, and then I want to add something when you get
Okay,
to Tower
pogo
Jet.
oscillations of the S2 again. That was
Or was that minor right toward the end of staging, wasn't it?
pardon me?
Did you notice any?
What? No, I didn't notice anything in the back as far as pogo.
I didn't notice anything at all.
No, on the S1, we're on the S2. Just started ignition.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, unusual noises or vibration, no. The Tower Jet was a very low noise level, just practically none.
Okay, I just want to, just for information, say that just
Where you at?
prior to Tower Jet, I could see, the only way I can describe it is aerodynamic heating, smoke coming across the hatch window and also the right-hand window underneath the BPC before it was jettisoned.
That was reported before, I think, on Apollo 9.
And there's no question about it. It was just coming between a window and a BPC, and it was aerodynamic heating. I could see it both on my right-hand window and on the hatch window. I could look over and see them both. And it was just coming up through there.
I don't think you need a BPC. I can't prove it.
Okay. The Tower Jet was done on time, and again, it was far less noisy than a DCPS. It was mostly just like a plunk. That was gone.
The real cue of Tower Jet was that the windows all open up on
Right.
you. That's a real cue.
Yeah, and you could see it
And
from
then
the
you could see
rendezvous
it
windows.
from
You
then
could
on.
see it go. Rendezvous
I could
windows,
see it
no
go.
question.
I was looking at it go. Guidance initiate was very smooth. All the calls and the communications back and forth were great. Inboard shutdown at 7+40 was right on time.
You could feel. Couldn't you feel that physiologically?
Oh, sure,
Yeah.
we decreased it, right. Inboard shutdown and everything. And then we got to go for staging, we get to go back. And again, when the outboards of the S2 shut down, we had again a structural pogo that was lower in amplitude than the pogo we experienced on the first stage, and it abruptly ended at about 3 oscillations because we staged off of the S2 and we were on the 4B. Instead of going all the way down and then with fired flag coming in went one, but just stopped. And then the light was on for the J2 engine on the 4B, and then it went off.
It's just like a small train wreck rather than a large train wreck.
I'll tell you, that was a ride and a half, man.
And again, there was noise associated with this. You could hear things blow like this. It's hard to describe. But then when the 4B lit off, we were all amazed how that one J2 engine growled and rumbled, and we had vibrations. You could feel vibrations. Where the S1C stage and the S2 stage was completely smooth, the S4B growled, rattled, and rolled during that whole burn. We were all on pins and needles. The thing was going to stop, but you could actually feel little vibrations. You could feel that all the way in there, and it wasn't a pogo. I never said we had a real pogo throughout any of the flight.
Nothing you could really feel as a
but you could feel little lateral oscillations, little fore and aft, but not a pogo oscillations. And the noise of that J2 engine on the S-4B was louder than any of the engines on the other
Hey,
stage, and it growled.
Wait a minute here. You remember this thing that Gene remarked on that was really noticeable?
Okay,
just
now-
prior to stage.
All right, just prior to staging, Gene had never ridden in a DCPS with us to any extent. And the way that the S2 has a propellant shift, it goes through about a 10 or 15.
Talking about the
Some
horizon
kind
change.
of guidance.
Okay, I could see.
Well, yeah,
I could see the
propellant
nose.
utilization and a guidance change in there, and to me it was nothing because I'd seen it in the simulator and on my arrow needles in the left seat and out this visual, and if you've never seen it out on a visual before, it'll kind of concern you, like the guidance is going wild, like it's pitching down.
I saw the pitch guidance change about 3 separate times where the horizon went on the bottom of my window and then went to the top of my window, then went to the bottom of my window, then went to the top of my window. It seemed to me it was more than a hunting, but Tom then verified that the guidance was good and what was happening, but you could definitely see that horizon just come up through your window, and then she'd pitch down. I'd figure, oh hell,
Here we go.
we're diving in, and then it pitched back. It wasn't a hunting like on Gemini. You could see the nose hunt. This was not hunting. This was definitely a pitch change.
Yeah, and
It happened 3 separate times towards the middle and end of the burn.
It didn't concern me a bit because I'd made so many runs on the DCPS in the left seat, and I was looking for this, and it occurred right on time. And it's more dramatic when you see it out there in space.
Yeah,
But,
I think it ought to be pointed out to
we
the crew
pointed
that
out
you'll
that
see it.
But it'll really take it. It's more dramatic than the simulator, but it didn't bother me because I was
Okay.
expecting. Okay. Again, we talked. To me, the main thing about the 4B was the way that engine growled and the vibrations from it, and I almost thought the thing was going to quit any second. But it went all the way in and it shut off just right on the money.
Guidance, man. Look at it, right down a cotton picking line. Look at this.
And John was plotting the onboard data, and it just looked beautiful. And that engine shut down just
Right on the money.
Right on the money. Couldn't be any better.
25,565 foot per second, 102.1, and minus
Goes
one
into the
tenth,
second burn
minus
here.
1 RDOT. Man,
Goes
what
into
guidance?
See the third phase ignition. It goes in the second burn and into the TLI burn.
Okay. The one thing after SECO, went through our insertion checklist. Everything looked good there. Good communication with the ground. The one thing we noticed was how solid the attitude of that Saturn was with using the APS engine. It was just beautiful. That Saturn had the guidance down there for the way it maintained orb rate. It was just like beautiful. That's all I can say. There was just no dynamics off the nominal. It was just beautiful.
And you couldn't, at least from the right seat, I didn't feel I could either feel or know when any of those thrusters were firing back there, nor could I during ullage for the TLI burn. The only reason I knew we had ullage from the TLI burn, we could see the delta V counter count up, but I couldn't personally feel it.
I could
Well,
see
you
the
could
yellow
see-
flashes.
you could
I
see
could
the
see the
light
yellow
at dark.
At nighttime, you could see the
That's
yellow
right.
flashes.
You could see the flashes. You could also see the where we're called for here is the lights on the S4B flashing too.
I think we have a real fine procedure for monitoring TLI as far as the sequence leading into time base 6 and the light on and the light out.
You're getting ahead of everybody.
That item is covered later on,
It
item
is.
5.
Okay, we're
Why don't we
on
just go through these?
Go down
auxiliary
these things
propulsion
and bang them
system
away.
again. Pogo oscillation, separation
have none.
lights. All right. Distinct sounds and vibrations were the growling and again we could feel motion and all that in all 3 axes.
This growling was particularly noticeable about the last minute and 40 seconds of the TLI
We're going to
burn.
get to that. There's something else we had on that. We're not there yet. We're back to 49. Again, the shutdown was good as we've covered before. Communications were great. Controls and displays completely satisfactory.
Sorry.
Yeah, I got ahead of myself too.
I'm sorry. I thought that was the whole burn.
True comfort through power flight. Man, we couldn't have been better.
It's so low G you can't believe it.
Yeah, shoot, you could do it standing up.
Earth orbit and systems check out, evaluation of insertion parameters, John's onboard chart, and the disk had everything. We had to go right away from the Capcom.
I mean, that guidance system was absolutely perfect. The insertion, it agreed with the ground, and we knew where we were. And if we'd had to do a mode 4 or an upstage, we could have done it with every confidence of being able to do it.
Initiation of time-based 6 awareness, no problem. Optics coverage jettison.
The optics coverage Edison was nominal.
The SCS attitude reference comparison, it was good. The numbers on our dials matched up within a tenth of a degree of what I was reading on the guidance, primary guidance in NAS system.
And that allowed us to align a GDC to the IMU by just using the two balls, just getting the roll, pitch, and yaw angles off 1620, dial them in, and punching the button. It saved you a lot of time.
Right. The drift rates we noticed early in the flight too were very low on the GDC. We did have an anomaly on the command module RCS on ring 1 due to a isolation disc being ruptured, and this procedure was talked over before liftoff. We agreed upon a procedure. We went through it right after insertion. It was all completed 18 minutes after insertion.
Turn on the heaters and burn them for
15 minutes.
15 minutes and
turn them off, pull the heater breakers and close the isolation valves.
Close the isolation valves.
COAS installation horizon check, fine, no problem.
What was the horizon check?
Well, just see how the S-4B was doing.
Oh,
No problem.
horizon check.
Unsto-
Unstowage and camera assembly, no problem.
You might.
Problem was in retention of all this gear that we got out. We really had you pull out one piece of gear, you didn't know what to do with it. That's the only problem. And on a tight timeline, that could bother you, but I didn't think it was a tight timeline.
During this entire TLI prep and unstowage, the commander and LEM pilot stayed strapped in their seats basically, or loosely strapped in their seats, and the command module pilot did all the LEB work, the unstowage, the optics checkout, and everything.
all systems verification and
Dock and probe extension was nominal. It occurred just like it does in the simulator. All you could hear a definite click when it got fully extended.
Communications were excellent throughout the whole boost phase. We never lost contact. We had good S-band check and a good VHF.
SCS attitude reference comparison was excellent. Low drift rates at that time, and again the SCS compared good for the numbers on the three dials with the DISCI readings. Earth orbit operations, I thought,
Beautiful.
were beautiful. We were
I think
20 minutes
really
ahead.
worked out a good timeline with the FOD guys, and we were way ahead of it, and it's an easy timeline.
We were 20 to 30 minutes ahead of everything.
Shoot, it's a piece of cake.
Continuous venting system and plume, well, it's nothing.
No, nothing you can do anything about.
Yeah, it works good.
FOD had to update our state vector 2 to 3 times, and every time we updated it, we were in a higher orbit.
Which
but
showed it we're at
showed
inch
up
to
on
the orbit
Verb
from
82,
the
but
vent.
it's no problem.
TLI preparations, we'd been through it so many times before, and our procedures are simple. And all we had was a card out there.
We had agreed that we wouldn't wear a helmet and gloves for TLI, and then chickened out there at the last moment and put them on. Yeah,
We
ended
did.
up, you know,
We
but
did.
it was
It
more.
was so easy. We were ahead of the timeline. We had nothing else to do. We said, "Shall we put them on?" So
more
we put 'em on.
psychological than physiological, because you know if anything had happened, there wouldn't have been nothing to.
But it was a case of that being ahead of it and
Yeah.
sitting there and saying, "Well, why not?"
Why not? You know.
Trans-lunar insertion configuration was
And
satisfactory. Verify the EMS delta V, that worked good. Scale changed. Systems readiness is fine.
We went through all the component checks and everything checked out normal without any anomalies on the system.
Engine alignment, I'm assuming this means the S-4B again. We really,
What do you know about that?
what do you know about that? The ground checks that. We got to go for TLI, the drift check. We've already done that under the SCS. Crew readiness and comfort, we were comfortable, and we were 30 minutes ahead of schedule, maybe 40 at times. Subject reaction was to wakefulness, fullness in the head, yes. As soon as I got in orbit, my head felt full, like normal sensation of head down position. You better believe
Yeah,
it.
we felt like we were upside down.
And we were upside down.
Till after we got through a couple of 8 hours.
8 hours. I
TLI.
felt I was upside down.
Standing on your head most of that
Yeah.
time.
And, okay, vertigo, visual disturbances, and spatial disorientation. I had no vertigo, neither did John, and I don't think Gene.
I didn't have any
vertigo.
I didn't have nothing during this whole phase. I felt like 100%.
Nausea, I had none, John had none, and Gene felt Didn't have any
Nothing,
housing.
babe, during this whole phase.
Response to rapid head motion and rapid intervehicular movement. Again, this is covered again in a separate area. There's no need to go into it at this time. Anomalies. Didn't have any.
None. Beautiful.
TLI monitoring procedure, the new procedure that we worked out with respect to manual backup guidance, and we worked out very well, and we were set the orb rate ball for the lunar torquing rate at 200 nautical miles, and we keyed in it the way it should match coming down, and it worked great, and we were all confident that if it was required to do a manual TLI, we could have done it, just no problem, and the correlation there was great. All right, the S-4B lit off exactly to the second on time, and it started its pitch down 5 degrees. And again, we were all getting very sensitive to any motion, and the main thing that right away that we noticed was the growling of the S-4B and these oscillations. There were little lateral and longitudinal oscillations as it growled. Then exactly between 3 minutes and 3 minutes and 5 seconds, a high frequency oscillation, noise, and vibration was superimposed upon the growling. And all three of us thought that the flight was going to be over right then. You could really go zzz, like
it was a zzz like that. Maybe 60 cycles or somewhere around there. It'd be hard to say what.
And you could feel the vibration in the couches. You could feel that vibration.
Hear it, and man, I'll tell you.
And that was superimposed upon the other vibrations of that engine back there, gimbling and the growling of the engine. So we all figured the flight was over.
So from 3 minutes on, we held our breath.
It provoked comments like, burn, baby, burn.
Yeah.
This continued right on through the whole.
It started exactly. I noticed my clock. It was between 3 minutes and 3 minutes and 5. We had the growling going, and the thing was vibrating, and
you can't call it pogo.
No, it wasn't a pogo. It wasn't
pogo.
But we were getting little longitudinal, little lateral, and all the way through, and then exactly at 3 minutes to 3 minutes and 5 seconds, this extra thing popped just like that on top of the zzz, and that vibration was on top of the other.
The couple of nights we had Ed James and those guys in for dinner, and they briefed us that the math model had showed you to expect a pogo in the last 15 seconds of S-4B flight, but I don't think we know.
We never had a longitudinal pogo. There was no longitudinal pogo, but what we had were these motions.
Okay, they misinterpreted that from your comments. They thought you said you did have pogo similar to the
No,
it was a random buzz, really.
It was a random buzz.
This might have been a high frequency pogo for all we know, but it sure was there.
It just came on like that, and it lasted all the way through the shutdown.
Yeah.
And again, it would never seen it before, never heard about it, and it really scared the hell out of us, because we thought, not for safety point of view, but we thought the flight was going to be over shortly,
And I was trying to figure out how we do a TLI,
TLI plus 10 aboard.
Oh man.
But again, these things, if you've never heard of them before, and the first time you experience them, it's a different thing. And I guess, again, out of the total boost, the thing that really was outstanding to us, besides the structural unloading of both staging sequences, was the growling and rumbling of that S-4B engine and the dynamics, and then superimposed upon that during the TLI burn between 3 minutes and 5 seconds. It's high frequency. I think Big said you had a random buzz that continued all the way through it, and you could feel the buzz.
I'll tell you, the thing is outstanding, really, though.
But the guidance was just beautiful, and it shut off within a foot per second. It was just fantastic.
Why don't we press that?
Okay. The S-4B maneuver to separation attitude
on time.
Was on time right to the degree.
Normal.
It was solid as a rock.
Smooth.
Pre-separation configuration was satisfactory. MCC go for pyro arm was good. Again, the attitude, the T&D attitude was good. Okay. On number 7, pick up, John. Translation and docking. We started out like we had, but
we started out exactly like we did before, and when we did the translation and docking photography. Started out exactly like we did before. We maneuvered to the angles that were called for, and we were lined up. And then, well, let me go. Separation was nominal.
John, excuse me, that's item 7 you're talking about. They get to transposition on 18 and docking on 20.
Excuse me.
You want to show this says photography up here.
Translation and docking
To
photography?
Translation
okay.
docking photography was we took 16 millimeter and 70 millimeter, and it was just nothing more than vehicle-to-vehicle photography. The television, it was the first time we used a television, and it's the only time we use a closed circuit technique. We had the time, so I pulled a proper breaker, and we had closed circuit television just to make sure we were going to get something on our monitor and that we could point it. When we got to ground, we pushed the breaker in, and it was no.
And,
IU was really wired.
and again, on television, we'd worked it out where John and I did practically the whole transposition and docking, left all the photo on that gene, there was no interference. And, we didn't even know he had the system on as far as we're concerned.
Insertion parameters and all.
Mm-hmm.
Tank
Tank
pressure
pressures, Tom.
looked good, just what we've seen in the simulator. EDS operation is fine, pyro operation is separation from the slaw. I thought the bang was probably less than what I'd been briefed on. Everybody said there's a huge crack and roar. Again, we had our helmets and gloves on, and we could hear it, but it wasn't as loud as I thought.
Okay, LEM or S4B or SLA photography, we saw as soon as we separated from the SLA, we could see SLA panels start to go out our side windows, and as we started turning around, we picked up probably 3 of the 4 SLA panels.
There's no indication on the EMS or anything that we got any delta V out of that separation,
That's right.
but we must have got some.
It's a good solid clunk.
Okay,
It's a-
let's go into what on this transposition, the difference, what we've seen in the
Okay, there we
simulators.
go.
Being a little further out, so
What we did was we applied 0.6 of a foot per second velocity, and then we got out to about 40 seconds and null that velocity to 0 essentially, and then start our pitch around at about a degree and a half a second, a little less than that probably. And when we got around, we were about 150 feet away from the dang S4B, which is not a bad place to be, but that's about 100 feet further away than we should have been. I don't have any explanation for this. It took us a little more gas to get back there. I guess better to be safe than sorry. And it took 3 different translations. We were still moving away from the vehicle when we turned around. It took 3 different positive translations of 0.2 to 0.3 of a foot per second to start closing the vehicle.
we use the exact same procedure we use in the simulator. When we turn around from the simulator, the vehicle would be out there 40 to 50 feet. And in real life, we got more delta V. And again, we had the guidance and nav system measuring it, and
I guess I don't understand it. But it didn't cause any problem. And if you're going to be safe about it, why not do it that way?
I thought that the total transposition and docking was done
We
for
could have
a
done
very
it.
minimum amount of fuel. There was very little thruster flying. As you can see that in real life. There. Visual inspection of the slaw panels, we didn't, it's like we went right into Snoopy. The docking.
We didn't do any formation. We didn't do any formation
Formation
flying. We just turned around and went in and
Right
docked.
back into dock.
Transposition was at a degree and a half a second, or it was actually it was less than that. It was about a degree and a quarter per second to turn around.
Stabilization alignment, well, John had gone
50
over
feet.
this.
We never did any of that. We just went on in.
We went right in, all the way.
We're doing 0.2 of a foot per second, and we docked in CMC and auto, and it was easy. There were no vehicle oscillations. Alignment, as far as I was concerned, was absolutely perfect. A piece of cake to do, and
To show how accurately John had it aligned, we looked at the docking tunnel for the limb activation. He had the roll aligned within a 1/10 of a degree. At the capture latches, both the barber poles went gray, and at the same time you could feel just a little klunk.
the CSM handled perfectly. The handling characteristics are just exactly what they were in the simulator. It's easy to fly in auto control, and well, there's nothing to it.
Accuracy of sunlight and docking lights, John.
The sunlight was no problem. I don't feel that sunlight will ever be a problem on docking. I don't think there's any need to constrain the angle of sunlight, except that you'd like to have it somewhere over your, somewhere behind you, as a maybe within plus or minus 60 degrees of being behind you. It doesn't seem to make any difference. Now, when we were far out there coming in, due to the brightness off the limb, the coas was washed out. But I don't. When we got in closer, it came back in again and was there the whole way in.
When John damped, then he aligned the attitude after we're off any attitude prior to firing the retraction bottles.
Yeah, as soon as we hit, if I'd have fired the bottle in, we'd have been all right. But I turned everything off and we sat there, and slowly the vehicle drifted down a couple of degrees. So I wanted to get it back before we wanted to get the attitude back. So I fired a couple of down pulses, and it slowly picked the vehicle right back up, and we fired the bottles and went on in.
All right, John gave us.
And I don't really believe we had any misalignment to speak of at contact. I mean, I don't believe the vehicle was off.
That's something like you want to see all.
I don't believe the vehicle was off at contact.
We had talked about the capture latches engaging, and then John told about how they drifted off a couple of degrees and he damped the attitudes. John gave me the directions to fire the retract bottles. I threw the switch, and I guess the one thing that amazed me, I thought it took for a long period of time for the retract cycle to pull in. I thought it would just be instant.
That hit me too. When you started retract, there's two things that I was amazed at in looking out that right-hand run of the window. Number one is that the limb moved such a distance during a retract cycle. I didn't realize it was that far away in the capture latch position. I don't know how far that is, but anyway, it seemed to me an enormously big distance. And it took, like Tom said, of course I saw it move, but it took what I thought was a long time to get to the capture latch point. Now, you didn't have the benefit of seeing it move. I saw it move, and I said, my golly, how close does that have to come to us before we latch?
And to me, what I said, is it retracting? Because I couldn't see anything, and I was waiting for the body poles to go gray and hear the rings locked together.
I told her she'd go, so she just.
But again, the main thing is I just wasn't aware of this total time that's required for the retract cycle. When the docking latch is made, it was kind of a ripple type of situation, a real rapid ripple.
Why don't you let John talk about the latches as we,
Okay,
or the purge rather, I guess.
okay, adequacy of docking line was okay. Sunlight and contact. Okay, command and limb pressurization equalization was done as per the decal. We did open the hatch at 4.5 psi on the cabin gauge, and when we opened the hatch and pulled it down in the spacecraft, it was obvious that the mylar bonded insulation had broken loose, and we had fiberglass insulation all over the inside of the spacecraft. We shoved the hatch in the bag and crawled back up in the tunnel to get to check the latches. All the latches were engaged solidly, and I felt around the edge of over on the bungees, springs 1, springs 3, 4, and 10. Excuse me. Springs 3, 4, and 10 were still partially compressed. In other words, they weren't all the way up to the top of the bungee, and that indicated they'd be one shots to cock, and they were. Took my helmet and gloves off to attach the limb umbilicals. The umbilicals configured normally, and we applied power, and that was normal.
John, to clear one point on your helmets and gloves, we were suited from pre-TLI until this point at which you verified the latches.
That's right. We're suited from pre-TLI through latch verification. And we installed the umbilicals, vented the probe, and reinstall the hatch. There was a great deal of insulation, fiberglass insulation that had floated up over around the probe, and it could be seen stuck on the limb center valve, whatever valve that is there,
Dump valve.
on the limb dump valve, but we couldn't stop to do anything much with it. And when we had quite a bit of insulation floating around in the spacecraft when we sealed up when we reinstalled the hatch. In general, hatch removal and replacement and positioning, now that we got the hoses reconfigured with a center and a left and the right hose, the left hose interchanged, is no problem, and management of that big hatch in zero gravity is very easy, as long as you don't try to rush it.
After completion of the tunnel work, I moved to the left seat, John was in the center seat, and we did the separation maneuver as planned.
Talks about extraction
Extraction maneuver, in which John fired the device, and you could see a real positive indication as we moved out of the S-4B slaw area, and then I added 3 seconds aft on the translation controller. When we then, again, as far as the delta V, the total delta V that I saw on the disky was 0.2 of a foot per second. And I was somewhat concerned about this, so I added one extra blip on the aft firing thrusters of about 1 second. And it still stayed at 0.2. When we made a maneuver to the ground computed angles, we pitched over, we could see we were already out 200 to 300 feet from the command and service, pardon me, from the S-4B.
Photography of ejection, vehicle dynamics doing ejection.
The vehicle was just solid as a rock. There were no dynamics at all.
No problem.
No problem with S-4B. No adverse plume effects. The separation maneuver was as described. The evasive maneuver, there was plenty of time between the time of extraction and the external delta V evasive maneuver.
The roll angle that was computed by the ground when we pitched to the evasive maneuver attitude allowed us to see the S-4B out the left side hatch window, and it's considered that this is absolute must before you perform the evasive maneuver, that you ought to be able to know where the S-4B is.
At the time of the evasive maneuver, I'd estimate our distance in excess of 500 feet, and I could also see we were starting to move a little bit laterally from the 4B. The evasive maneuver, the external delta V, went exactly as planned, and residuals were available to the ground and also were recorded in the data pack.
That's in it.
As far as the S-4B slingshot maneuver and venting, we never saw the S-4B after we did the evasive maneuver.
Yeah, we did. We saw it a number of times out there in the distance.
All way in the distance, 1,000 miles away,
Yeah.
in reflected
Yeah, but
sunlight.
we never
as
saw
far
it
as
make the maneuver or
There's
anything.
a slingshot maneuver and a venting, propellant dump. We never saw any of this. EDS systems deactivation,
What do? You turn it off and pull the breakers.
turn it off and pull the breakers, and I was late in doing that. The ground called me on it.
I'll see. Yes.
The timeline throughout this total effort from transposition, docking, extraction, evasive maneuver was very easy. Just absolutely no problem. We were always ahead of time.
Okay, the first thing that we did probably,
This is Trans-lunar coast, item 6.0.
says IMU realignment here. Okay, we did the IMU realigned to rest mat. Early in the Trans-lunar coast period, and it's recommended that the ground provide roll, pitch, and yaw angles in which to perform the IMU realign, which will give the crew a chance to see stars, in other words, about 180 degrees from the sun, and yet avoid the problem of coming up with the desired gimbal angles yield gimbal program alarm when you go to gyro torque. Gyro torquing took about 4 to 5 to 6 minutes, but at the completion of gyro torquing, the P-52s were just as good as if appeared to be just as good as if there hadn't been any gyro torquing, which is phenomenal.
To doff the PGAs required considerable effort. In fact, at times we had two of the crewmen helping the third one trying to get out of the PGA. We were really impressed by the effort that was required to doff the basic garment.
It was quite a bit more effort than was required in 1G to doff it. On the other hand, donning the PGAs was a piece of cake, except for zipping up the zippers.
The problem was in getting the neck ring off over the head and getting the arms out of the shoulders.
Right.
It's
The
really
legs
difficult.
came out fairly easy.
Legs were okay.
Number 3, optics calibration.
Optics calibration. Optics calibration was extremely difficult because there wasn't any visible stars to fly to in a telescope, and so we put it off as long as we could. And then I'd like to say something about that. We don't have any place in here to say that, but on the way to the moon, there was never any case where we had more than 1 or 2 stars, even 180 degrees from the sun, visible. There was no place where we could recognize constellations per se on the way to the moon, and very few places where we were doing P-23s or P-23 type things where we could recognize individual stars except through the optics. And it would be very convenient if there was a routine in the computer which would fly the spacecraft to position a star for optics calibrations if they're required for each P-23. It would save you a great deal of fuel, especially when you can't see the darn stars in the first place. Some of the optics calibrations were done at angles which didn't really have a great deal to do with in other words, when you were doing star landmark tracking in the vicinity of the Earth, you had to do the optics calibration to find a star a great deal further away from the Earth than the procedure recommends. The procedure wants you to do the optics calibration in the vicinity of the body that you're tracking. You couldn't do that because the Earth and the Moon and the Sun would cause a star shafting across the telescope and completely blank your vision from seeing any stars with a lunar module on. And the lunar module will cause the reflected sunlight to also cause sun shafting in the optics at various positions from the start of TLI clean through Trans-lunar coast. We were never at any time to see any stars except through auto optics. Thank God for auto optics. We were never at any time able to see any recognizable stars except through auto optics.
Or make remarks about P-51s then if you had to do
P-51s would have to be done with the planets, Jupiter in the vicinity of the moon, in our case, Mars in the vicinity of the Earth could be seen. And of course those are about 180 out from each other, which would make them very poor. Or the sun. We didn't try the sun option, but we had filters on board to use the sun, and I think that those would work okay.
One item, the first stars I ever saw through any of the spacecraft windows, I observed and checked with the ground. It was rolled at an angle that had the sun away from us. And even though we've been rolled at these various angles all the way through, I finally saw the first stars when we were approximately 100,000 miles from the Earth. At that time I saw Acrux and Alpha and Beta Centauri, but they were very dim. But I did see those out my side window, and as we neared the moon I didn't see any more. Photography. The big squawk we have on photography is about the cameras and the magazines.
I think that probably is covered later. Photography went normal. We just took pictures coming and going.
System anomalies. Thank you, Joey.
We didn't have any system anomalies going to the moon, did we?
ECS redundancy checks throughout the whole mission performed, the backup systems performed well on the checks, came off smoothly.
Yeah. The water boiler didn't work.
Okay, well the water boiler, I think we covered, maybe we didn't. The water boiler failed, or didn't fail, but she dried out during liftoff. We tried to resurface it in Earth orbit and started up again in a 2-minute resurfacing and a restart. And she dried up again, and then we never used the water boiler until we resurfaced it for 3 minutes, at which time we brought it up and it worked for re-entry. So the only ECS problem we had was the water boiler, and that really wasn't a problem at all.
We found that we had to clean the info screen twice a day to keep the insulation, which was being scrubbed out of the cabin, from clogging it up completely. More on that later. The potable water chlorination was no problem, except that the 4th or 5th day I forgot to do it, and just forgot. I was really going to do it, and I forgot. And on one occasion when we serviced it, even though I backed the screw out on the buffer to retract the ampule, to retract the buffer full of water, the buffer thing did not retract, so I didn't get any water back from it. On another occasion, there was considerable leakage around the chlorine nozzle, and I got considerable amount of chlorine on my hands, which I dried off, and it didn't seem to cause any problem.
Communication set up for sleep periods, most all the way out, well on beyond 100,000 miles. We use the Omni mode of communication of antennas, using Omni Bravo and Delta. We were in the Omni position, and the ground then switched us between Bravo and their capability for Delta. They did an outstanding job of it. We never lost comm. We really couldn't hear the switchover with the squelch enable on. Occasionally a little low buzz when we're running on the ragged edges of the antenna. Later on we use the react mode of operation of the high gain S-band plus Omni D, and that operation worked very fine. The react mode worked fine. There were no problems. I'm covering item 8 and 10. There were no problems with the operation of communications or antennas at all. And 11 also. Procedures were fine.
The preferred passive thermal control mode is really tremendous with respect to visibility of the Earth all the way out. And once we determined one slightly modification to the procedure in flight, we were able to go one time for a period of 18 hours without firing one thruster, which is a good operation for saving fuel.
The first night, the passive thermal control mode we set up was a 1/10 of a degree per second with 20-degree dead band, pitch, yaw, and roll, a GNN, 4 quad control with a roll disable. A spacecraft plus x-axis was normal to ecliptic when we started. This immediately produced considerable thruster firings when the vehicle got into the deadband after a short period of time, and the thruster firings continued throughout the night. They were very disturbing and kept Tom and I awake. Did it keep you awake, Gene?
It did. Those
It
thruster
did.
firings kept me awake.
Kept us awake most of the night, and the concern, of course, was fuel usage as well as
And what the amount that would keep me awake was not so much the dull thud of the thruster so much as the dynamics of the vehicle associated with it, because the vehicle would go through about 3 or 4 oscillations. That was my feel.
the vehicle oscillations caused by the thruster firings. The second night, passive thermal, and from then on throughout the mission, the passive thermal control mode was set up as follows: at the completion of the maneuver to the I think we ought to record this thing. I don't know because nobody else has got it. At the completion of the maneuver to the desired axis to set up the tight deadband, we did the maneuver in tight deadband
To the attitude.
to the attitude, a 1/2 degree per second. Then we would enter on our 5018 display, disable the C and D adjacent quads, and it could have been Alpha and Bravo, for example. Disable 2 adjacent quads for the auto RCS select switches, and wait 20 minutes or as such time as we got to go from this fin that our rates were low enough to go into the PTC mode. Then we go with the manual attitude switches to acceleration command and enable all the jets, and we would initiate the 3/10 of a degree per second roll rate as called out in the GNN procedures. And when the 3/10 roll rate was initiated, we'd go manual attitude and roll to acceleration command. And we would open the dead bands to 30 degrees, to plus or minus 30 degrees, and put the pitch and yaw rates to rate command. And when we did this, we had not one single jet firing during the whole night, and approximately it appeared to be about a period of 18 hours where we didn't have any jet firings. It is recommended that this be the standard PTC mode for Trans-lunar and Trans-earth coast operations. Take care. There were 2 periods of Cislunar navigation sightings. One prior to the first sleep period and one after the first sleep period. It is recommended that with a LEM attached that these sightings be planned pre-flight so that it won't take a lot of attitude fuel, and that the stars aren't too far for the planet to be observed, because you're really limited with the lunar module on and how much viewing area you have to look through the optics with. And we changed those in real time after discussing this a couple of days prior to flight. We changed those in real time to allow us to save more fuel. The first set of sightings was for the purpose of calibrating the horizon to my eye, and the horizon I was sighting on, according to the data, was 32 to 34 kilometers. This is to me was a very hazy layer above the horizon that appeared to be the highest line above the horizon, which I could see a useful altitude. It was definitely well above the cloud lines. The horizon, the star horizon sightings were no problem, and had gone just like in training. It's considered a simulator as a very useful device to do star horizon measurements. It is recommended that a slide which shows the same kind of horizon that we saw in actual spacecraft be put in the simulator to improve this, to give a guy a feel at those ranges of the kind of horizon he'll be looking at. It'll be just a different slide. The second period of star navigation sightings after the sleep period, the horizon was much less definite, and in fact it appeared to be almost non-existent, and those sightings were no problems. The auto optics worked beautifully, and in many cases a complete pass of star horizon sightings could be done with just the auto optics alone, never having to go to CMC and free to do the sightings. And in every case where this was possible, it was used. It's very difficult to fly this vehicle with a CMC with a MIC controller. You just cannot think roll, yaw, and pitch in an axis that's 35 degrees from your primary control axis. What can I say? Optics calibration, as I said before, in every case, on both sets, was very difficult. It was repeatable in every case where it was required, but with a limb attached, it's very difficult to find any star near the body of interest to calibrate. And it's certainly recommended that if this is seriously going to be done with a limb attached, that some automatic mode be developed to fly to the star. The optics and the spacecraft handle easily doing navigation sightings. That's all I can say. The optics are perfect. That's great stuff.
Adequacy of procedures to prepare for and accomplish Trans-lunar mid-course corrections, just strictly external delta VP 30P 40 and simple, nothing to them.
Yeah.
17, adequacy, Comm performance,
Can I say something? Well, did we talk about mid-course corrections? Okay, let me say something about the when the gimbal's actuated, the pitch and yaw gimbals, and ran through the gimbal drive test, the vehicle oscillated, the whole stack shook. It excited a resonance frequency in the whole stack and shook it up and down. And equivalent of a stroking test, only probably much more violent. And I think that should be reflected on the needles on a simulator. And also use some fuel to correct out those oscillations.
Comm performance and high gain reflectivity test. The procedures and the performance of the Comm was excellent. The high gain reflectivity test was done on TEI. It was done on the TE Trans-Earth Coast.
Yeah.
And the results on board look like it recovered from the reflectivity area on two of the three tests, and the other one it did not. However, the results of those tests were not discussed, and the ground has the data. They were carried out in about 20 minutes without any problem.
Television preparation operation, simple and straightforward.
There was no television preparation. All we did was plug it in, and there it was.
Box and plug it in.
And stowage and restowage of the camera was a piece of cake, and simple and no problems whatsoever.
There was concern prior to flight that the stowage of the camera would be difficult to remove and unstow, and it came out with the fingers.
High gain antenna performance. when we locked up in high or in wide or medium beam width, or beam width on a high gain, she'd lock up fine, and as soon as we go to high, the signal strength would jump up a couple notches, and there was no problem. It worked just as advertised. On 21, I believe.
21, daylight IMU realign and star check. All IMU realigns and star checks were performed in the daylight as far as the crew was concerned on the way to the moon. There was no darkness, anything that could be called darkness, except for one period of time when we entered the lunar penumbra prior to LOI.
Battery venting and waste, we checked the battery vent, and the only time we actually had to vent the batteries was after boost and insertion. We did it at that time, and it was good. All the waste vents worked perfectly. We had apparently no freezing or icing up in any of the systems. Radiators performed excellently. As I said, we went the whole distance without a primary water boiler until prior to reentry, and the radiators both all the way in coast worked in fine fashion, and we had good ECS temperature control, or good ECS temperatures. We were comfortable.
Command module, lunar module, delta pressure. The delta pressure decay was indicative of a very tight lunar module.
Column.
I don't remember what the numbers were, but they weren't
We have it
much.
recorded. It's real good. 25, John.
Reestablishing PTC had recommended the procedure previously discussed be used to reestablish PTC. It is recommended that realigns, where practical, be done while still in the PTC mode. They were very easy to perform and suffered no loss of accuracy by doing them in a PTC mode, and there's no sense, unless it's a critical maneuver such as LOI, for example. There's no reason to have to go through the process of killing the PTC operation.
High gain antenna react check in a PTC mode worked okay. We used a react operation in lunar orbit during sleep periods. In fact, as we used it in lunar orbit, I recall most all the time, and also on the way back. It worked fine.
Optics, Cal, you've already covered that.
Fuel cell performance was excellent until the time at which we lost, this gets into the lunar orbit, however, but all through the coast phase, the fuel cell performance was fine. The purging worked fine. We lifted off without the fuel cell number 1 oxidizer gauge, flow rate gauge, but the ground had that information, and depending on the load, and normally during the coast period, since we were powered up, the load was high enough, but depending upon the load, the caution and warning, the master alarm would come on during purging, and as I say, during that coast period, we were powered up high enough so that it came on every time we purged, in either system, oxygen or hydrogen.
Eating periods.
Plenty of time on the way out. And,
The first eating period was scheduled at 9 hours after we started. Seemed to be a good time to do it.
We invariably, our morning eating period was sort of set because we ate as we got things together, post-sleep checklist in order, after we got up. Our second eating period of the day sometimes dragged out to be the last, and we sort of ate when we were sufficiently hungry to eat. That could have been called a noon meal, a mid-afternoon meal, an evening meal, or a night meal, depending upon the day and the circumstances.
We skipped a noon meal on the second day for some reason. I don't remember what it was, but
Probably
we just
weren't
flat
hungry.
missed it.
We just weren't hungry. Probably.
rest periods were completely adequate, and we slept about 6 to 8 hours the first night. I guess the second night out, or even towards the third, we were just inactive for nearly 12 hours at a time. It was long, for 10 or 12, it was a long period.
The workloads in coast after the tunnel, the latches are all checked out, the probe is checked out and everything, are little or nothing.
Yeah,
There's
the
little
big-
or no zero-G workload.
The big workload was on the command module pilot with respect to making those sightings. That was the major-
Sightings and realigns is all you do. And actually, I was grateful for something to do, that's all.
During this period of time, we also studied our flight plan for the lunar orbit activities and studied the lunar surface maps and the rendezvous procedures. This was done for the 2 days.
It's recommended that these be put into the flight plan as standard times given to crew study for critical phases of the flight. For example, the certain period of time could be allotted prior to LOI, a certain period of time prior to entry to refresh your mind for those critical events. So,
Passive thermal control we've already talked about. And from the environmental conditions of the spacecraft, spacecraft was adequately cold and adequately warm. It was comfortable on the way out.
LOI burn. Item 7, LOI through lunar module ingress. The realign was done in the lunar penumbra, no difficulty.
it was done with no difficulty, and for the first time we could see stars as constellations, so the star checks were unnecessary, but they were done anyway, and the realign, special efforts was made on the realign to get to do perfect alignment.
The burn, pardon me, but prior to the initiation of the LOI burn, approximately 1 minute, I would estimate, we suddenly saw the lunar surface at the far side terminators, or the near side terminator, just starting to come in reflected through the lens window, and then I could see part of it out the hatch window. It was a couple of minutes before. Right, we saw it 2 minutes before the burn.
Here's a picture.
That's right, because you said, look, get back in.
See?
Yep, I'm with you.
And we were out in daytime. The burn appeared to be very little transients with the initiation of the burn and the guidance, and it was steady.
Yeah, it was steady, and the thing that was noted about the burn transit, it was noted on the D crew, is that you get continual control and roll. It's up against the dead bands, controls it over and roll, fires the thrusters, and it works back toward the other dead band, hits that, and then fires the thrusters for a while and rolls back over into the other dead band. It's not objectionable, and there were continual small rates in pitch and yaw, which are certainly I had the scale on 5 and 1, and they were less than 1/10 of a degree per second in both axes. But it gave you a very good feeling of how the vehicle was performing. Chamber pressure was normal, about 102 to 103 psi after the second bank came on.
And the chamber pressure increased, didn't
It
it?
increased slightly during the burn, appeared to. Burn residuals were negligible.
Right, we had a 0x burn residual. These are all done. Our monitoring techniques for the mode 1, 2, and 3 of LOI worked adequately, and the procedures there are perfectly adequate.
The SPS burn card was used throughout the mission to perform SPS burns, and certainly appears adequate for performance of the operation of the engine, and seems a shame to have to fool with anything much more. Peace.
Orbit parameters,
I'll probably find it, John.
the burn put us in perfectly nominal orbit that is expected from the LOI burn. All the monitoring techniques during the burn was adequate.
The LOI-1 put us in a 169.1 by 59.6.
According to the onboard system.
The onboard verb 82. chamber pressure went from, it started at 98 with one bank and then increased and ended up with two banks at 103.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's go on down to 7.
Okay, well, yeah, that takes care of all the way through 6. Acquisition of misfin was without difficulty. We had the, as I recall, the high gain attitudes to acquire them, and it came in loud and clear.
PTC attitude for lunar orbit was perfectly fine, except we noticed that the quad that was towards the sun would continue to heat up. In this case, it was quad A, and it's off scale high on temperature after the first time. So we did a different roll attitude for the next one, but again, the PTC attitude in lunar orbit was initiated just like the trans-Earth coast, and I think in lunar orbit we never fired a thruster at night.
Well, we were using only plus or minus 10 degrees in lunar orbit, and we still didn't fire.
Still didn't fire any thrusters all
that
night long.
bothered us. I think we fired some on occasion, but it wasn't bothersome.
Yeah.
The only thing that bothered us about not firing thrusters for so long periods of time is, which was great at saving fuel, is the question was, let's be nice to fire one once in a while to know that they're still working, but from the standpoint of PTC and fuel saving and stability, it was just a great attitude.
IMU realignment was a piece of cake in lunar orbit. You have dark up there, no problem. It was noted doing IMU realignments about this time was the first time that I really noted that by taking a special care of positioning the stars really within the center of the optics, you could repeatedly get 5 balls instead of, for example, 4 balls 2 or 4 balls 1 for star angle difference. And I don't think it's of much concern except for those critical events such as long burns, LOI, TEI, and reentry. I recommended to do that.
The updating preparation of the burn for LOI2, again, just another external L to V, and it was a short burn compared to naturally LOI1, no problem.
We noticed in both of these burns that the pugs was beginning to fail to operate properly. In our first burn during coast, we found that the pugs went to a decrease of about 150. Excuse me, at which time the decrease switch was activated. It caught it close to 200, brought it back to 0. The decrease switch was put in a neutral position. Subsequently, on these following burns, after the spacecraft, the system was able to stabilize out. After 15 seconds is when the pugs was used, and it was very easily recognizable going through the 50% or crossover region. But the pugs then requested an increase in oxidizer flow. The percentage quantities remaining requested an increase in oxidizer flow. The switch was put that way at about 150 on the increase side, and for the subsequent burns throughout the mission, the pugs continued to go towards a max increase position and stayed there, and we never did get the parent pugs operation or the oxidizer fuel balance back again.
Television and lunar orbit was no problem. It's like everybody brought on television. 16.
Removal and storage of the hatch for the IVT limb was the same problem with the removal, the hatch removal. It was very easy to remove, but once you got in the cockpit with you, you had a lot of fiberglass insulation in the cockpit with you.
We did not don the PGAs for this operation.
We had to pressurize the lunar module, and we used repress. We did not use the same. It's not in here, but
Go ahead and talk about it.
we had to repressurize the lunar module and
For a few PS.
for over a delta P of a couple of psi, and for that purpose, we used a shot of repress O2 to get us back up to speed. You remember how much we used?
Went down about 500, I think. on the tank?
Because we're interested in a rapid repress and ingress, and we did a pressure check, pressure decay type check before we went into it all. I think it was unnecessary. But that, I'm sure that also disturbed the insulation more and made it, and was the reason why we got some additional mylar off the hatch. Additional insulation, I keep calling it.
Verify the latches. The latches were the same as before.
The latches were identically the same before. They were re-verified, rechecked, and inspection of tunnel mechanics.
The tunnel was normal. We found a misalignment roll of minus 0.1, which is practically on the zero mark, which is practically outside the limits of reading the grossness of the alignment scale.
Removal of the probe and drogue. The probe and drogue were removed as per checklist and removed themselves as per checklist. There were no anomalies associated with handling either the probe or the drogue during the removal. The thing that was noted of interest was that the probe is very easy to handle. A big probe is very easy to handle. We had no problem removing it. There was one thing: the probe did not appear to collapse completely, as we'd seen in other. It didn't collapse as much on the first removal as it might have. In other words, it was still partially open, and we had a little difficulty getting it around the hoses. But it wasn't. There was nothing we can do anything about. We stowed the probe in the. We stowed the probe in the command module by tying it with a single snap strap to the foothead of the right-hand couch. And this was of little concern to us. We did not use the drogue or probe stowage straps, and well, you might use them if you had a farther depths. The drogue was stowed underneath the probe in the same vicinity and was not restrained in any way. The probe adequately restrained the drogue when it was underneath the probe.
IVT to the LEM, the LMP went into the LEM shirt sleeve. The first thing he encountered, of course, was a LEM hatch. In the tunnel area was a lot of floating mylar debris or insulation debris from the tunnel hatch. And when the LEM hatch was opened, the floodlights were on as prescribed, although it was very dim lighting. The first thing that was seen was a mild snowstorm of insulation that had blown during the pressurization of the LEM, that had blown through the LEM dump valve and into the LEM. The hatch was inspected immediately and found that there was insulation stuck to the semi-greasy seal all over, many pieces as big as some cases as a dime. The dump valve was inspected, and we found pieces stuck in the seal of the dump valve, pieces that had to be pulled out, picked out, and a sharp instrument such as a automatic pencil had to be stuck in there to force some of these little pieces of insulation out of the dump valve. The hatch was cleaned and wiped, and the dump valve was blown out, physically blown with air from the mouth to try and make sure that it was totally clean. The hatch was locked in place normally, and the ingress was complete without any ingress disorientation. All you have to do is go into the LEM with your eyes open, and you realize that you're coming in standing on your head with about a 60-degree yaw, and just do a 180 in pitch or wherever else you want to go to get your feet on the floor, and you're in a new environment with a new up and down
just very much like you've been in a simulator, and you could care less what's beyond that tunnel and what orientation the command module is in, because now you're in a new orientation all of your own, and it's perfectly nominal, perfectly satisfying. The Velcro on the shoes of the sandals did not restrain you totally, but certainly helped restrain your feet to the surface, to the floor of the limb, when you were moving from left to right from one panel to the other during the switch orientation verification. But I want to again stress that although it was different, if you keep your eyes open and look around and just turn around, you're in a new environment with a new up and a new down, and you're just living in it. It's very familiar. LEM entry status, as per checklist, and we found the LEM to be exactly in the configuration we left it at liftoff. The power transfer to the LEM was nominal with the proper lights, just as written in the procedure. It might be noted that although sometimes when the man you're talking to is well up into the command module, you have to lean over in the tunnel and talk quite loudly or almost yell to him. He can certainly hear you, and you can hear him. If you have a man in a tunnel, you can almost talk to him in normal levels of voice, and he can transfer information without any difficulty at all. Now, the problem then that was encountered after a little bit of work in switch verification in the LEM at this point was this insulation was still floating around in 0G. The circulation down in the LEM was very poor. The insulation became irritable. It became warm. You could feel yourself tending to breathe this stuff. And so what we did at that case was pull a command module, LEM pilot's hoses, and of course we had to screen on the exhaust hose all the time, and drop them all the way down into the LEM, and they just laid down there and floated freely, which blew fresh air around in the LEM. And from that point on, although there was still a lot of mylar floating around, and some of it going back into the command module, the comfort level working shirt sleeve was certainly adequate, and the ventilation was certainly adequate. Transfer of equipment from the command. No, that's right. Transfer of equipment from the command module. This equipment was listed in the checklist or in the flight plan, which we highly advocate. It was labeled on the transfer bags, such as 16mm film packs. While the LEM pilot was in the LEM making the switch verification, the command module or the commander was gathering the gear together and sending it on down. As he sent it, it was stowed immediately in a place that it should be without any difficulty. Piece of cake. The ops check was left till the end of that day after all the communications procedures and everything was checked out. However, with the addition, as we put on this flight, of the checkout and a nomenclature of where things are on the ops, on the OPS, the checkout procedures right on the OPS. One was taken out and handed to the commander, and he effectively was halfway through the tunnel and was checking one out, while the LEM pilot was fully in the LEM checking the other one out. The checks went normal with exception of one item, and that's the fact that the OPS, which was labeled Stafford, the battery lights failed to light, or the heater lights failed to light during the press to test, indicating that the heater was not operating. Neither light operated. However, the other OPS checked out satisfactory. Pressures were good, and as far as we're concerned, we still had two good OPSs except for the heaters in the one. They restowed with very little difficulty once you understand the fact that you've got to push that oxygen supply hose out of the way to get the pins in, but they gave me no trouble at all. There was no IVT. Oh, I'm sorry, that's chimp IVT photography. The rest of the LEM operation that day was communications checks. The only restraint I want to again say that I used was used during the shirt sleeve operation in the LEM was just the Velcro on the sandals, and that is adequate for shirt sleeve operation of LEM checkout. Landmark updates. A system used for landmark updates, which is updating the map update, LOS, 150 degree west, and AOS, sunrise and sunset times were excellent. It's recommended they be used as standard procedures in future flight planning. The landmark update format for defining the times at which the landmark appeared at the 0 degree line and the 35 degree elevation line to start the pitch rate for LEM-on landmark tracking were adequate. Landmark tracking of the first site, F1, was done with a sextant, and it was done by tracking a small crater on the left corner of landmark F1. The location of F1 through the auto optics mode was about 5 or 6 degrees away from where F1 actually is located. And this happened on every case. We made 5 sets of 5 marks on F1, and it was always wrong. On B1, it is believed, but not certain, that on the first attempt on B1 with a LEM on, due to the LEM auto optics acquisitioning, the poorness of it, and the lateness of the time in which the landmark was acquired, that an erroneous landmark was tracked for B1. It is highly recommended that if landmark tracking is to be continued, that more thought be given to selecting landmarks which are the position of which is known prior to the mission, and the acquisition of which can be easily performed with a LEM attached. Landmark tracking per se, either through the telescope or the sextant, was easy, and was a coordinated effort with a commander flying the vehicle and the CMP tracking, and to locate mark intervals. And it was noted by the ground that we commenced making our marks too early, and after we delayed them 20 to 30 seconds, the system seemed to work properly. There is no way for the crew on board to tell what is the proper time to start making marks. The geometry of the situation does not lend itself to an onboard determination of what this proper time should be, in my opinion. Pseudo site F1. Okay, that's.
The Misfin CSM LEM relay contest were effectively not performed at the direction of Misfin. We did the LEM comm checks. We proved out the adequacy of the LEM comm system. We proved out the anomalies that were expected. And although we had time prior to the end of prior to the upcoming LOS, we were directed to forget about the Misfin LEM CSM relay mode test.
Consumables accountable. With respect to consumables, our philosophy was we had tremendous telemetry with the ground. Let the ground look after the consumables. The only time we occasionally would glance at all the gauges as far as onboard recordings. All we did was record those as listed in the flight plan at night. Food and rest in lunar orbit to me was exactly like on PTC, because we had on the only occasion with a thruster fire in the way we set up this mode.
Our rest configuration, we used all 3 sleeping bags, and we were happy we had them, because when you close up the windows in the command module, it gets a little bit cool.
Even in lunar orbit.
Even in lunar orbit, that's correct. In our configuration, almost every sleeping night of the flight was 1 man in a sleeping bag under each left and right hand couch, and 1 man in a sleeping bag keyed to the comm system, a sort of standing watch in the couches. The food was, again, adequate, long, tedious, and difficult to prepare.
Mr. Slate not back yet?
And I guess the food will be covered in more detail as part of the later systems. We can talk about it as far as wet packs and everything else concerned a little bit later. But it was adequate. We were not hungry. We were not undernourished.
It was originally thought that we would leave the probe and drogue under the couches, but it was noticed that they took up so much room that it didn't seem to be a very nice way to operate. So we reinstalled the probe, reinstalled the drogue, unloaded it, and reinstalled the drogue. It was more difficult to get the drogue in and out of the tunnel than any other piece of equipment, although this had been anticipated and it was no problem. We reinstalled the probe and unloaded it and reinstalled the hatch, and the total time for this reinstallation was somewhere less than 15 minutes. Okay, peace. For transfer. Where are we?
Damn it, you just did tunnel operation.
Yeah, roll cal, no sweat.
Why don't we go 8.0 lunar module checkout through separation. 8.1 command module.
Okay, CSM power transfer.
This is in the next day that morning.
Yeah, okay, well let's talk about that next day some, because that gave us some trouble. That we woke up about a half an hour early on the next day so that we could get on with the space program there.
Right, we wanted to make sure we were always running 30 to 45 minutes ahead of everything we did, because we anticipated it would have some little minor glitch. We didn't know what it would be, but something would happen.
Sure enough, it did.
To bang right through that. Right there.
CSM, the hatch was removed, placed down underneath the couch. It was not placed in the bag because we didn't figure we'd be having it out that long. It was stowed underneath the couch. There's no tendency for it to move. The probe was removed, retained with its strap down on the lower foot strut. The drogue was stowed underneath the probe in place, and we started to get on with the program. We didn't eat very much breakfast that day. I think we had some juices among the three
We're
of
still
us.
concerned about all the gas in the stomach, so we ate a wet pack and just some minor things. Mainly we ate a wet pack to give us a lot of protein for the job ahead.
Didn't you prepare some of those the night before?
I prepared applesauce and then a couple of juices for everybody the night before, and we all had a wet pack, and what we prepared and pressed right on breakfast took us no time.
Tom put on his suit the first.
Why don't you just go through the command module because they pick up the line.
Okay, Tom put on his suit. You don't want to talk about it in terms of the timeline, or you want to talk about it in
I
terms
think
of
we need to talk in terms of timeline. I put on my suit, had no difficulty getting in. John was helping me and helped me with the zippers, and it only required 5 minutes. It was
at the most.
At the most, it was just all squared away. Oh, I think Gene ought to talk for people that have liquid-cooled garments. They ought to put that on and get it all squared away and sleep in that LCG the night before.
Right.
Yeah,
We moved the canister change back early to get it out of the way of donning the suit. You can't don the suit and change the canister at the same time.
And okay, while we're on this suit donning, the man or men who are going to have to go in with LCGs, and I guess in future mission it'll be 2 men, because of the biomet harness change out and because of the unstowing and unpackaging this vacuum packed LCG and what have you, I highly recommend this is all done at convenience the night before you go to bed. You can take all the time in the world. It's not a discomfort to wear to sleep with. As a matter of fact, it's a little bit warmer than just sleeping in plain ordinary underwear. And it's much better feeling to come back and get ready to put on your suit and not have to go through an underwear change and a biomet harness change and the whole works. But it was no problem putting it on and no discomfort at all.
Yeah. In that regard, there was a heck of a lot of items that aren't in the flight plan or aren't anywhere. Insignificant little things that took up a lot of time. And I wished people think that when you got something in a flight plan, that's all you're doing. That's not so. In every case, when it says DOF PGAs or DON PGAs, there's no evidence, realization made of the little idiosyncrasies of each system, which is when you take the suit off, you've got to take all the pencils, all the pens, all the tools, all the equipment out of the suit and stow it on your constant wear garment, and that takes time. And we never allowed adequate time for it. And it's recommended that where possible, the guys that are going to have to don their suits the next day completely install the gear into their suits, if they can do so, the night before they have to change out, because it saves them 10 or 15 minutes the next day, which they're going to need for other things.
That's right. Getting in that LCG the night before just made getting in the suit a piece of cake. All I had to do was put on my UCTA and jump in the suit, make the water connectors, urine connectors, and zip it up, and that was it. It took me as long the night before to get into the LCG, or longer, than it did to get into the whole suit the next day. I'd say I was in it and zipped up with the help of the CMP in less than 10 minutes. Is that right, John?
Yeah, less than that. It's good.
Now, one thing, let's get the suit straight. On that morning, the LMP again went back into the LEM for a period of about 30 to 45 minutes, initiating the LEM checkout prior to separation in shirt sleeve, and then the commander came in fully suited, activated the ECS system, fully suited without helmet and glove, that is, activated ECS system to get his cooling. By that time, the LEM pilot was about through with his checkout, and he came back in through the tunnel into the command module, where then he got suited up. Now, this was a great help because we could work in parallel, and it kept the command module less crowded so that it was easier for the 2 men at a time to put on a suit rather than have 3 men in there.
Okay, transfer of equipment, you got that?
Piece of cake, we talked about it. We had all the equipment transferred
Except
the night before, except the helmets and gloves.
Where are we?
We should be down around 8.1, 3 or 4, somewhere in there.
IMU realign. Let's see where
What's this
we're on.
again?
Okay, we did an IMU realign. The ground had to remind me it was an option 1. However, the difference between to go from option 1 and the other one was insignificant. It was an insignificant change. There's no problem on the night side. The LEM, VHF, A and B checks.
B worked on that one. B Simplex worked beautiful, and but on for some undetermined reason, the LEM would not transmit on VHF-A at that time. We tried numerous checks.
I could hear you. I could hear you just in the background in sort of a feed-through mode, but I couldn't hear you very loud. It just sounded funny, and I knew you were saying something, but I didn't know what it was.
It's been suggested it might have been a corona buildup on the LEM VHF system. The VHF, I could read the command module loud and clear on all that.
Or it might have been some sort of antenna pattern interference. But anyway, that we were concerned about prior to undocking.
Well, I switched the antennas in the command module, and it didn't fix anything.
The tunnel closeout.
Tunnel closeout was the tunnel was closed out as per checklist. The drogue was installed. The probe was installed, and it was nominal in every respect. Just went in beautifully in a very short period of time. The probe was preloaded, and the estimated breakout force was about 40 pounds, just exactly as it had been on the last probe we used down here. And when and then the docking latches were all released. At first, the auxiliary release button had to be used to release latch 1. Latches 3, 4, and 10 were indeed one-shot cock latches, and the other latches cocked nominally. A final inspection was made of each latch individually to ensure that a final inspection was made of each latch individually to ensure that they were in fact backed off, and it was reported to the LEM crew that they were in fact backed off. The tunnel hatch was installed and sealed, and a pressure equalization valve was closed. And at this time I got an O2 flow high warning light when I removed my helmets and gloves, and the reason for that was that the inflow valve had been closed as per checklist when I'm fully suited in helmets and gloves. So I opened the inflow valve, but I was kind of nervous because it indicated we had a pressure leak. And when I vented the tunnel would not vent.
The inflow valve was clogged with this insulation material is what caused the
That was part of it. It was partially caused by the fact that it was clogged by mylar insulation, which had been sucked in on a second time, and the other thing it was caused it was that when you have your helmet and gloves off with the inflow valve closed, you get an O2 flow high. It's a standard operating thing.
Why don't you finish talking about then the command module from this end, your landmark tracking, and then we'll go back into that.
We were told not to maneuver we could not vent the tunnel. We were told prior to this time not to do any roll maneuvers, to deactivate the roll jets, and not to do any roll maneuvers until we vented the tunnel. And at this time we were LOS in the ground, and we could not vent the tunnel. So nevertheless, the attempt was made to stick with the timeline, and we attempted to maneuver to the roll attitude. Unfortunately, I had been operating in FCS and neglected the cage of BMAGs, which resulted in oscillations in roll, probably in excess of 1 degree per second. I know we're in excess of 1 degree per second, and it's resulted in a slippage of the ring. And I'd estimate the slippage of the ring to be 6 to 8 degrees.
At this
I
time,
think I would say that.
right. Well, the docked IMU alignment came off as prescribed, and then when we went to the fine aligned torquing angles, I noticed they were probably in excess of what they should be. And then we had another one from the ground, and they came back again. The ground informed us that they were suspecting we had a slippage on the docking ring, and so after that we did no more final lines to the IMU.
Okay, and we canceled our landmark tracking because there was no way we could get to it without rolling the spacecraft. And we just maneuvered in pitch and yaw to the undocking attitude.
And again, we never reached we did not reach the total undocking attitude that was prescribed in the flight plan.
Well,
we could we?
No, we did not. We never maneuvered to the 180 roll attitude, to the attitude prescribed for undocking, which was let me get my checklist. The attitude that we maneuvered to was 0, 14 degrees in pitch, and 0. We had some yaw associated with it because we were in wide deadband. And this was not the attitude that was recommended to be done because they said the sun would bother us too much in that attitude, and the sun had absolutely no, this was 180 out from that attitude, the sun had absolutely no effect. And I recommend that that 180 roll be eliminated from the future missions since it's unnecessary. Okay. Anyway, we had this. The ground informed us that there would be no problem with the undocking at 5 psi, and differential under pressure. Photography preparation, the TV was set up prior to undocking. There was only one switch thrown and the lens cap removed to operate the TV. The sequence camera was all set up and mounted in a right-hand rendezvous window. Unfortunately, I didn't check its run operations prior to separation, and the magazine had jammed, and I was unable to do so after separation. The attitude control mode for separation was tight deadband, min rates, and it was certainly adequate. The undocking maneuvers were nominal, DAP loads nominal. Undocking was done 5 minutes ahead of time to square ourselves away as regards orientation, and it was rather difficult from the standpoint of the lunar module. I'll let you guys talk about station keeping. Was a piece of cake.
We worked out a coordination we had before that with respect to the up-down maneuvers. I would do that in the lunar module, which is very easily done, but the left-right
And the in and out.
of the fore-aft was done with the command module.
And I expect on a lunar flight where they're fuel critical, they do all those maneuvers with the command module. Station
Right.
keeping with the command module was just as easy as it could be.
It appears like we have a tremendous propellant budget on the command module.
I think so. LEM drift checks were nominal. LEM inspection photography, could not do it except with a TV. I did plenty of 70 millimeter photography on a catch-can basis. We had to do a bunch of things simultaneously. Station keep, write the DOI, phasing, and PDI abort pads, and conduct photographs all together, and you really wouldn't be able to do that without the attitude hold mode and the command module, but it really performed beautifully. It's difficult to get your head back in the cockpit when you're trying to keep station on somebody to do any work much. Separation photography, we got that with a television. Sextant tracking.
You're able to ascertain that, since I was up in a little above you one time, that all 4 gear were down and locked without having to yaw around.
Yeah, all 4 gear were down. Yeah, I see no need to do that 360-degree yaw, except gives you a warm feeling. You might do a pitch up, for example, a pitch up and face all the gear toward you. A guy would be able to tell whether they're down locked or not, just by the geometry of it. LEM inspection photography. Sextant tracking. Is this after the set maneuver? We didn't know.
Yeah, it is,
Yeah.
John.
The separation maneuver was nominal, 2.5 feet a second down. The VHF was turned on and operated. The radar range and checks were nominal. The auto optics was not tracking very good in the mini football. In fact, it wasn't tracking at all, but we could track them in the scope, because you could see them through the telescope that close in with a big light, and it was working adequately. Rendezvous radar and optics track.
You want to talk about the flashing light on the LEM at all?
The flashing light on the LEM was beautiful. It was really wiped us out in a mini football there while we were in the dark there.
That flashing light could not be seen from within the LEM. We never saw it. Daytime, nighttime, AOT alignments, ever.
Is that
Never
right?
see it.
I wouldn't have thought that.
It's very well designed as far as not being able to be seen in the wind. In fact, we'll get that in a little bit.
The VHF to V85 range, we didn't compare that, but I did compare the VHF range to the raw range from the lunar module, and I recommend that to be the way it be done. The V85 range would be subject to errors due to this state vector from the center of the Earth. The update pads, I could not cover the update pads from the ground, but I was able to get them later from the lunar module. there was some communications problems at this time, in that everything that I said to the ground, I could hear myself say over again 2 seconds later. I never did understand.
We could hear that from the limb much of the time also.
They were shooting it right back to you then.
Yeah, and
So
I
it matched
and I
your
recommend that
voice.
those kind of things be corrected, because that's darned annoying. You don't know whether somebody's trying to get you on the radio or not. Coas calibration was not performed because there seemed to be no reason to do it. Coas tracking was not done because it didn't seem to be necessary. Certainly not a requirement from a navigation standpoint. The workload, the timeline, and the flight plan for this phase of the operation was completely adequate. It is highly recommended that only one book be used and it be complete for this period of time, the CSM rendezvous book. We were using the flight plan, the update log, and the CSM rendezvous book, and that's entirely too many pieces of paper for one guy to try to fool with.
Okay, you want to talk about the lunar module? John, are you done?
Yeah.
8.2, the lunar module. They say the power transfer the second time, just as it was a previous day, was performed without a hitch. We got the proper lights, the proper indication of power transfer and activation. All the data on the battery voltages, which were very high. We operated off of low taps for, until we got a lot of the systems well into their power phases, until we got a big load before we got down to 27 volts. All these numbers are documented. The checkout went, the total checkout, looking at it grossly, went well, and I think it went well because the anomalies we ran into with the tunnel vent pressurization problem cost us some time, so it paid us to be ahead of the checkout. The checkout was conducted initially for about the first 30 to 45 minutes by the LMP unsuited, then the commander came in suited, and the LMP returned to the command module to suit up. Whole operation of suiting up and getting back in probably took less than 15 minutes. One procedure that was followed in the LEM checkout, activation and checkout, was that when things were done, they were literally physically crossed off with a pencil, because we had to, as expected, skip around at some times, and when they were done they were crossed out. Any particular documentation that was necessary, any data that had to be recorded was recorded right in that checklist, and that is the only checklist, that only document we had out at that time in the LEM. The commander had one and the LEM pilot had one, and they were identical documents.
The one reason that the activation and checkout went so smooth is the fact that we had practiced this real time in the simulators integrated
Suited.
and many times unsuited, and also approximately 3 times completely suited where we would practice suiting up, and we had everything down to the nth degree, and as a result we were just where we wanted to be. We're again running 30 minutes ahead of time until we'd have to wait for a time dependent item like, let's say, acquisition of misspent. The dock alignment and the ECS test went real good. The VHF test, anomaly on VHF simplex A, the transmitter from the lunar module, was as noted, and later after undocking it came through in good shape.
I didn't say anything on mine about the radar transponder checkout, but we can talk about that.
Okay, we'll get to that in ours and you can comment. I'm still back here at 8.22, Tom. Okay, the pings activation and turn on went just by the book. We saw the self-test completed and verified, and it was good. And I might say there had been, in this process of developing this checklist over many weeks of finding out whether the simulator was correct, whether our systems checkouts were correct, has finally paid off, because all the anomalies that we found time after time after going through it in the simulator were finally all washed out, and what came down to the real vehicle and the real checklist, boy, they were matched. And I tell you, it was really a comforting feeling to see the proper lights come on at the proper time, and not too little or too many lights come on, to see the pings self-test and the ag self-test come out as prescribed. It seemed to go that way throughout the whole activation. The ECS was powered up with without any problems. The glycol pumps were turned on, and when I went to the primary evaporator flow number 1 position, the glycol temperature was up high scale close to about 80 or 90 degrees, which appeared to was no problem. We knew it. We did it in a timeline according to the book, but it was about, I guess it was about 30 minutes at least before that temperature slowly came down, where the glycol temp light came out and it came back within the normal green band.
You can hear the glycol pump all the way in the limb.
The glycol pump is got bearings that were made out of lunar surface gravel, I'm sure, because it sounded just like it, both the primary and the secondary pump. The VHF, problem's been mentioned, but while we were going through this preparation to check out, contrary to the procedures contrary to the mode we wanted to use, we had to be in VHF-B because it was the only mode, B simplex. It gave us the only mode of comm we had until after separation.
Right, we had to modify our procedures there instead of using A simplex, but there was no problem.
Communications, S-band Omni antennas, we had checked out the previous day. We decided to use the Omni down voice backup mode, which gave us a hot S-band continuous key mic, but the communications were adequate. When the time came to power up the high gain steerable, our comm became much better, both going and coming, and there was no problem with signal strength, and there was no problem with an auto lock-on. And I sure do want to say that the procedures we worked out for having the high gain pitch and yaw attitudes correspond to the command and service module spacecraft attitudes worked out beautifully, because it was always within the realm of the capability of the LEM antenna high gain to acquire with enough signal strength without even tuning it in manual, but to acquire at those attitudes to then go to the auto position and lock on with a very high signal strength. Those numbers were worked out and proved out to be very adequate. Secondary S-band and TR and power amplifier checks were made and were adequate. We never used them the rest of the flight. Telemetry updates came through loud and strong without any hitches. Tom, you want to talk about 9, assisting and tunnel closeout?
The tunnel closeout was as practiced, and I verified that
You installed the drogue.
I installed the drogue instead of John this time, and since it was very easy to do, and
I made sure it wasn't closed out, man.
And I verified the capture latches were engaged, and felt each one.
When we preloaded it, he verified that capture latches were in fact holding.
The suit loop checkout under 10 went as prescribed. 11G.
S-in batteries were brought on the line. By this time we had high voltage taps on the decent batteries, and as I say, all batteries, all 6 batteries were well up there. The values are documented, but they were all within the 35 to 37 volt category. The S-in batteries were brought on, and the check went nominal throughout the normal and backup S-in feed system.
What is that noise you guys made up there when you banged that thing?
The noise had to do with the ECS, was the repress valve. Every time you change the position of the repress valve, it sends a shudder through the whole spacecraft. It's a loud
You should see what it does to the command
bang.
module pilot. You should have seen my dynamic oscillations.
Well, we knew about this from the debriefing from 9, and we expected it, but it was still a loud bang. And
You caught me on that second one, though. You didn't tell me when you
I
did
know,
it.
I didn't tell you. We're coming to 8-212 and an end of tape, and we probably ought to cut it here and pick up an 8-213 on our next tape, on the other side, I believe.
You ready?